Hello and welcome to the Rabblecast. My name is Eric Hernandez and you are listening to episode number 623. I am flying solo on this episode. Doug's a little under the weather. It's understandable. We hope he feels better. Don't worry, he's on the show itself, just not in the intro. On this episode, we're going to be talking about strikes, and more strikes. We've talked about the writer's strike and the actor's strike in Hollywood. Now we're going to be talking about the automotive industry and how they're going to be going on strike as I'm recording this in about an hour. Midnight on Thursday night, they are voting to go on strike, and they're going to have a little bit of a different approach to this one. They're calling it a stand-up strike. So we talk about it more in the episode itself, and we'll go into some more details. We don't cover it all, but we do our best just to report on it, and we will cover it further as it develops. We also talk about some movies and different things that are coming in Hollywood. Even though they're not able to promote them currently, there is news and more development on a new Crow movie, which we talk about, the different actors, different people behind it as far as producers and directing, and some of the history of the Crow franchise itself. James Obar, the creator and writer and artist, and the subsequent projects that all came about because of that first graphic novel and that first film starring Brandon Lee, which, if you've never seen The Crow, I and Doug implore you. It's a fantastic movie. It's a product of its time. The actors, the story, the soundtrack, it all comes together in this great moment in film. Please check it out. If you haven't, it's fun. It's a heartbreaker of a story, but it's a story about love. And all the subsequent project that came after that, as far as the films, they're take it or leave it, depending on your tastes in different stories. But we'll talk about that and a lot more on this episode. We are brought to you by InsidePulse.com. You can find us under the podcast section. You can also check out the show over on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Rabblecast. Check out the show over at rabblecast.libsyn.com, where the show is always uploaded, and that's the main home, hub, whatever you want to refer to it as. It's there for your enjoyment. Follow us on Facebook for the Facebook fan page. Send us a tweet at Rabblecast, and email us, rabblecast@gmail.com. Again, stories, pictures, comments, feedback, whatever. I love reading them. I love seeing people engaging with the show. I love the criticisms. Sometimes I try to implement certain things. Other times, not so much. But that's all to say, we love hearing from you guys. We hope you're enjoying it. And with that, I hope you enjoy the show. Let's get into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. You're doing good there. It's not how you want to start off. Come on, let's go.
Sorry about that.
No worries. So you were mentioning before we started recording that are you still feeling a little under the weather? Just a regular cold, or?
Yeah, it's definitely not COVID. I tested multiple times, and it's not COVID. I don't even think it's a cold. It's some kind of a chest infection, I think, because I just cough for a good portion of the day unless I'm constantly sucking on cough drops or drinking hot tea. Sleeping sucks. I don't really feel that bad, other than the fact that I've been pretty much sleep deprived for like the last week or week plus. So other than that, I'm not bad.
It's not allergies. You don't. Do you have any allergies, I should say?
I have allergies, but it's definitely not allergies. No, allergies, when I get those, yeah, my sinuses get clogged and I get sniffly and all that kind of crap. But yeah, that ain't this. I have no idea what this is. I think this is just an extra way of shit sucking right now. So okay. I don't know.
All right. Well, I hope you feel better and alleviate your coughing, and you can actually get some rest.
All right.
To that. Try not to make you talk too much. Well, we'll see what happens for tonight. Is there anywhere in particular you want to start off with? There's a few different stories. I mean, again, we when we talk about the movie industry, things come and go depending on what's happening. But there was I don't know if you heard about the UAW strike that's on tap for, I think, tonight, actually.
Oh yeah, yeah. I saw on the news that yeah, United Auto Workers might be going on strike. So yeah, hopefully they get what they want.
Yeah, the big thing about this one is the three major automakers are saying they're going to have a strike as of midnight Thursday night, September 14th. And the big thing about this one is at 10 o'clock, so less than an hour away, they're going to announce what they're going to be doing as far as the strike is concerned, because it looks like they're not going to be getting anywhere near close to what they want as far as contract negotiations. So what they're going to do is a stand-up strike, which everybody's like, what the hell's going on with this?
Yeah.
Well, I guess a sit-down strike is what you would normally get. I don't know if that was where it was initially started by these workers back in the day. There was different stories coming out. It was kind of coming fast and furious today. But a stand-up strike, as they were announcing, is they're not going to strike necessarily all three all at once in terms of they're just going to say, that's it, walk out. What they intend to do is strategically at different locations, they will start to do a strike. So they'll give the go-ahead at midnight, and when they report for work, they're just, I guess, going to stand up or, not do their jobs. And then as negotiations continue, whether they get better or worse, they will then announce different locations that will then begin their own stand-up strike. So it's going to be like a randomized strike in a sense, but they're picking which locations. They're just keeping the front office guessing as far as what areas will be going on strike next. They'll just make a phone call, say, all right, you guys are up, and then they'll institute the strike in that area or that location. So it's going to be a little odd, it sounds like, but it sounds like a well-planned, well, I guess just a strike going forward, where they're going to interrupt the production of all these vehicle makers, and we'll have to wait and see how it all pans out.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. This is from Reuters. A first ever simultaneous strike at the Detroit 3-car makers by the United Auto Workers grew all but certain on Thursday, with little progress reported in the talks hours before a contract deadline expires. The union, which represents 146,000 U.S. auto workers, is asking for 40% pay raises through September of 2027, and major improvements in benefits as part of what it calls audacious demands. The UAW has outlined plans for a series of strikes targeting individual undisclosed U.S. auto plants if agreements are not reached by midnight on Thursday night. The union plans to disclose the initial plans during a 10 p.m. Event. The last one was earlier today on Facebook, I believe. They did like a Facebook Live, and they announced what they were doing. It was the initial announcement of the stand-up. Ford Motor CEO Jim Farley told CNN the proposal to hike wages by 40% would put us out of business. He said there were no talks going on and that the automaker has received no counteroffer to its plan to offer 20% pay hikes. U.S. President Joe Biden on Thursday spoke with the UAW President Shawn Fain and leaders of the car companies to discuss the status of the negotiations. Just 10 days ago, Biden had expressed optimism that a strike could be averted. I'm not worried about a strike, he says. I don't think it's going to happen. Well, I guess he was wrong.
Well, yeah.
There's a lot to this story, and I think a lot of it reaches back to the last recession, where the different motor companies were having trouble with their cash flow, essentially, because due to the recession, everything just went upside down. And there was something along the lines of, to help them save money, the union agreed to shoulder a lot of like the pension and the insurance costs, essentially saving the companies like somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 billion.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, they never really got anything back for it, even though they were helping out. And now with everything going sideways again with the economy, they're just saying, hey, look, we helped you out a few years back. We're hoping to get something back for that help. Things are getting worse, and you guys are having record profits. These numbers are going higher and higher as far as money that you're making. How about you put that towards your employees? And the way things are going right now, they were saying that unions for the longest time had less and less members. They were going weaker and weaker over the years, but now that's completely reversed, especially with recent pandemic. They've been growing stronger and stronger. The numbers have been increasing, and the powers of unions in general have become just kind of ridiculous in a sense. But it's good for the workers because now they're able to argue and stand up and say, hey, look, we're doing this, and we want fair compensation. It's very, very similar to what's happening over, in Hollywood, where all these people are saying, like, the higher-ups are making all these record profits, all this money's going around, why don't you trickle that down instead of just funneling it upwards to the guys in the, in the nice suits? Let the workers get something for their troubles at this point. And I don't know, I really didn't get too far into the details on this one. There was a lot going on, and the fact that we've been having a lot of different strikes either be threatened or happening, like we avoided the UPS strike from a few weeks back. There were a few other ones that were like lingering, whether they were or weren't going to be going. I mean, obviously we know the writers and the actors in Hollywood are having their strike. The video game industry might be having a strike of their own real soon, because once again, people want to get their fair pay. But this one's a pretty big one, being that the automakers, for the longest time, especially in the United States, it was considered like a homegrown or like a bread and butter type of industry. Like, it was as American as you could get at the time. And they, at one point, just up and left, especially when you hear the story of like Detroit, Michigan. So this is, I don't know, this one's kind of a weird one. And I guess as we're recording, they're going to be releasing the information as far as what they plan to do and how they're going to institute the different stand-up strikes and what locations will be targeted first. And then from there, we'll have to wait and see if they can come to terms, because this is going to be a big one. It's going to, once again, a large number of people are just going to say, we've had it. And it's up to the people who control the bank accounts to say, okay, well, we're going to try to meet you halfway, or we're going to try to meet you to a certain point. And it's going to come down to negotiations, but they definitely want to get what they're owed or what they believe they're worth. 40% is one thing. I believe I read at one point that they want to institute a 32-hour work week. And there was a few other things here and there, improvements to benefits, pensions, retirements, and all that. They want things to get better. And I do believe, I don't know if this is, maybe you might know better than me. At one point years ago, when they did one of their strikes, they essentially, one of the requirements for their strikes back in the day was that they wanted to institute like a 40-hour work week. So pretty much creating the weekend for workers who, would work from 9 to 5 kind of thing on Monday through Friday. Because, let's face it, if the higher-ups had their way, they would make somebody work 7 days a week, probably like 12 hours, and just try to get as much benefit as they can out of those employees' hard labor, and not worry about burnout or fair wages at that point. So this one seems a little odd, but apparently it's been brewing for quite some time now. Any thoughts?
Well, the big thing with all of this is, sorry, I don't know the specifics of this one. All I know is, especially the automotive industry in the United States, they love to play this game of, well, we're having trouble, we're having massive losses, we need government bailouts to help us out. But when business is up and everything's like that, well, look, we're having a great time over here. We're going to institute stock buybacks, and our stock value is through the roof, and our executive compensation is beautiful. Oh, do you have anything for the workers? No, we can't be bothered. No, it's fine. So, I know what? I can't speak to the specifics of this plan. It sounds like it's 10% a year for 4 years through 2027, you said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know what that's based on. I don't have any specifics of that one. I don't know too much about the United Auto Workers. I just know that generally, if it comes down 999 times out of 1,000, I'm going to agree with the workers. Because if I've learned anything in my life, yeah. The problem with CEOs and boards of directors, there is no such thing as enough. They want unlimited growth. it's never, no matter how, oh, you had a great year, you had 20% increase in revenue and a 10% increase in profits. That's great. What are we doing next year? It's nothing is ever enough, and that's part of the problem. So they're going to pinch and cut wherever they can. There's an old concept. I wish I could remember the term for it. I just heard today. This is actually kind of works out well. I was just listening to a podcast today about the Battle of Blair Mountain, which we can get to in a moment. But there's this basic theory in business where the cost of your equipment is going to be a relatively fixed cost. Capitalization is going to be a relatively fixed cost. Material is going to be a relatively fixed cost. So in all of these areas, what's the easiest place to cut? Your labor costs. And so, of course, that's what they're always constantly chipping away at. And this is nothing new. I mean, this has been going on for years. This is probably the most labor action that's been in the United States in, Christ, I don't even know, probably 100 fucking years.
Really?
I mean, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, there were the big pushes of unionization back between, well, a lot of it started with the coal miners back in the 1890s all the way through the 1930s when they really kind of took everything home and pretty much everything kind of became stabilized. And then you had of course, Depression. Everything took a big turn. Then after that, between FDR's social programs and World War II, that's really what kind of put the Great Depression at an end. And then you had the mass unionizations of the 1950s, but at that point the apparatus was already in place. And this is to the best of my knowledge. I'm far from an expert on the history of organized labor in the United States. I'm sure we can get somebody from the AFL-CIO to call in if we need more specifics. But yeah, I mean, that's something, if you think about it, yeah, the unions and a lot of labor stuff have been slowly chipped away since that time period. I mean, look no further than, a lot of the shit that was pulled in the 1980s under Ronald Reagan. So the fact that things seem to be slipping back in the other direction, not just in a lot of the existing unions are finally starting to get some more power behind them and basically going for more labor actions. But the fact that we're seeing labor organization in places we never saw them before, like with Starbucks stores unionizing. There's some Dunkin' Donuts that are working on unionizing right now.
Yeah.
There's those famous stories that came out of, I think, Los Angeles and Portland, Oregon, where some strip clubs unionized. So if it's good for labor, it's good for us, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and it's funny when you hear the stories of different groups wanting to unionize, and then the employer, when they catch wind of it, do very underhanded, through underhanded means, try to persuade them not to stop them or just interrupt things in general. Recently, when Amazon different locations were trying to unionize, they were holding meetings on why you shouldn't, what the harms of a union can do to you. Do you understand what you're agreeing to, and all these other things. I can see where a union might cause certain trouble in certain areas, especially if it's gone unchecked. But for the most part, unions, they're there to help the individual workers. Fair pay, compensation, insurance, work environment, as far as making sure that everything is safe. It makes sense because, again, you've got the higher ups who are just going to watch that bottom line, and that's all they really care about. They're not worried about the workers on the floor. They're not really worried about who's doing the job, so long as the job gets done. So in this case, to see what's going on now that we've referred to it as the summer of labor, with all these different strikes and unionizations going on, it's quite interesting to see what's going to be continuing, because these different groups, when would you have thought a strip club would unionize? That just sounds so far-fetched, but at the same time, you're like, yeah, no, that's a smart move. Because
absolutely
picking up different shifts and everything, whatever the case is. I don't know what the work environment of a strip club is. I've never been a patron of one, so I've never actually seen the inner workings of it. But it would make sense if people are going to be taken advantage of, given less pay. If the new person comes in and they get the shit shifts or stuff like that. Whatever the case is, these people need to be protected. It doesn't matter if you're building cars or just showing a little skin. All these people should definitely get paid. I know we've talked about in the past before with the world of professional wrestling. They've tried over and over again to have a union happen, and it never comes together. And I don't know if it's because if it's working for strictly for the WWE or for other companies in general, it just makes it kind of weird where like you have to have these standards in place to protect the people that are coming in, whether you're a veteran or whether you're a rookie. And I don't know. It just seems that unions definitely should be more commonplace. And they should not be as frowned upon or, tried to undermine them as these companies tend to do. But you're right. Like whenever it comes down to what they want to try to save a little cash on the bottom line, it's the workers on the floor that usually the ones that take the hit.
Well, I could tell you a couple of things here. Number one, and this is an interesting broad point that I've seen. One of the reasons that, not to get too political on this one, but we already are kind of political. One of the reasons that the Democratic Party has been having the issues it's been having over the last 10 to 15, 20 years is once upon a time, the Democrats, they were the party of the union. If you were a union man and you did not vote for the Democrats, you betrayed your union brothers. That all changed when the corporations started buying up the Democratic Party, just as they bought up the Republican Party. Yeah, all that changed. They sold them out. There was once upon a time, like the area I came from, Luzerne County up in northeastern Pennsylvania. That county, just like Pennsylvania, that county went for the Democrats. I think in recent history, the only time they didn't go for the Democratic nominee for the president was for Reagan in 80 and 84, and Trump in 2016 and 2020. And here's another interesting thing I can tell you. In case you're wondering, I do know some of the specifics of the operation of the strip club.
Oh, okay.
Because I used to hang out with this one married couple I knew, and they both worked at the strip club. The guy, he worked the desk, basically tracking and collecting the cash for when they do a private dance. And his wife was the house mom. She was a former stripper.
Ah.
So the way it would work at this specific strip club, which I'm not going to use the name of, because they exist, but they've changed names and management, and they screwed over a couple of people I'm friendly with when they decided that the new regime was like, no, we're going to do this differently. So what they would do is, say, for example, you're a dancer, you're coming in, you pass the auditions and all that kind of thing, and you get in, you go to work. So you actually are basically, you pay a house fee every night to come in, and basically you're effectively renting the use of the stage for your songs.
Weird. Okay.
And so basically what you're doing is, as soon as you walk in the door, you're starting in the hole, because you have to pay whatever the fee is to the house to basically go up there and dance. And you're making money on your tips and your private dances. And then also out of that, you got to tip the DJ, because that's considered the right thing to do. Otherwise, he will fuck up your music, probably on purpose. You also tip the house mom, because she's kind of like advocating for you or kind of helping you out, however you want to describe it, whatever. So effectively, a lot of the time, they're starting in the hole. So, I don't know the specifics of the strip club unionizations. I'm very curious of like what concessions they're actually like working to get. So, here's the thing. Like, if we could see, anytime there's a new labor movement, that's a good thing. Like we talked about before. Can unions get out of control? Sure. Anything can get out of control. I mean, were there abuses back in the 60s? Yeah. But I'm not an expert on these things. And I often wonder how much of this was because you had a couple of greedy people up top. Unfortunately, organized crime did get involved with them as well. But it's one of those things where, anything can be corrupted no matter what. But anytime you still have that check and balance against corporate power, like I said, I look at it as generally a good thing. So,
yeah, and that's what you want. It definitely needs to be done sometimes, because when the higher ups, how do I put this? See, I'm always at a loss with these kind of things as far as like how to word it correctly. But when you have the front office that has, absolute power, they make the rules, they make the regulations, and they just get drunk with power because they can see who they can hire, they can fire, what they want to change, what they want to implement. After a while, like you said, things just get a little corrupt, or they get a little drunk with power, and you have to have those checks and balances, and that's ideally what the union should be for. I know that for me, I've been out searching for different jobs, and it's funny when I come across a job that says, "Oh, we're a union, and this is what's expected of you," and it's every union's a little bit different. And I remember I had a friend tell me, just make sure you find out what the union wages are. They're usually pretty similar place to place, but each one has their own little thing. I was like, no problem. But everything I see, like as far as pay compensation, cost of living, work environments, regulations, whatever the case is, they sound like they can inundate you with rules and regulations and meetings and seminars, whatever the case is. But ultimately, they're there to protect the worker.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, so long as they don't get out of hand, sounds great. It sounds great on paper. It sounds great for the person. When I mentioned to a few people that I was looking for different places, and when I say it's union friendly, they're like, "Oh, that sounds great. The benefits must be amazing." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Mm-hmm.
Like this is still a thing, because my only experience, my only experience with a union back in the day was when I used to work retail, and there was a place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember how far back this is going at this point. I don't know if you remember Bradley's retail store.
No, didn't have those out in my neck of the woods.
Okay. Bradley's is, I guess, what would be equivalent to like a Target nowadays. Worked there while I was in high school for a short while, and it was, a condition of your employment was that you enjoyed the union. So they took a small cut out of your paycheck. They referred to it as union dues. And you would have an advocate. If something happened, you would call them up and everything else. Like I said, I was young. I didn't really have too much experience with that part of it, but it seemed like every time they would have a new announcement, something we posted in the break room, for the most part, it seemed like a good thing. I didn't see any problems with it. And then whenever somebody had an issue with the supervisors or the managers, the union advocate would get involved, and they would fight on your behalf. And for the most part, everything seemed to be on the up and up. But I didn't stay at that job very long, unfortunately, and I didn't reap any benefits from it, but I'm sure anybody who's been there for a long time, 5-10 years plus, probably had a better experience, or hopefully had a better experience with the union working on their behalf. So if you were there X amount of years, you would probably be given, a pay bump. If you were there long enough, you would get an increase in your vacation time, whatever the case is. These all sound great because these places will work you to the bone if they can.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care about your free time. They don't care about your family time. I mean, yeah, they'll say, "Oh, we want to take your family into consideration." BS. Like they just worry about the money that's coming in and coming out. So I don't know. I don't mean to sound harsh. I guess retail has taken its toll on me throughout my life. Working
as harsh as you're sounding, I'm sure somewhere along the way it's been that harsh or worse. So yeah. It's all good.
I'm definitely curious to see what's going to happen. The one estimate I see here, a full strike would hit earnings at each affected automaker by about $400 to $500 million per week, assuming all production was lost.
Mm-hmm.
And that's from Deutsche Bank that had made that estimate. So I don't know how this is going to work. Again, I don't know the ins and outs of the automotive industry as far as what's required for them to continue to remain profitable, to keep production going. But they say supplies, parts, all that stuff, like all those different departments or companies, or locations, they're going to all get hit. And once again, unless these people come together and say, yeah, we'll funnel some of that money down. We'll compensate you for this. We'll compensate you for that. I think right now, especially with the experiments of different places, I know different countries are trying to institute 32-hour work weeks, but for the same rate of pay. So it's almost like you would still be getting your 40 hours. You're just getting it within 32 at this point. It makes more sense because for us to keep working 5 days out of the week and only have 2 days to do things. I know you've probably had this feeling. You walk in to the office after a weekend off, and Monday mornings you're just like, where did the weekend go?
Hmm.
And
Oh yeah.
like they always talk about that work life balance, and that's something that's sorely ignored in most places. I know a lot of guys I used to work with, they would work 60, 80 hours in a week, not because they had to. It's just, what they've gotten so used to. And if you weren't on the same page as them, it's like, oh, you must be lazy. You must not want to get things done. It's like, no. I'm all for getting things done. I'm all for getting the work in. But at the same time, let's work smarter, not harder. But
Yeah, and also, I mean I'm not the big fan of that hustle culture grind mentality stuff of, well, if you're not working every hour, like, money is more important than everything else. It's like, well, what the fuck? Like, if you really need the money, I understand that. But if you're just working because you've decided that's more important than everything else in the world, well, yeah, you're kind of in a sad place, in my opinion. Because what's the point of life? Like, I think the magic number they figured out is about $90,000 a year is the point when most of your expenses are going to be covered. You're going to have enough money to go out and have a good time and do a bunch of fun stuff. So at that point, after that, it becomes like a declining returns on that.
mm-hmm.
So it's one of those situations where I think of that, and it's like, how much money is enough? But some people are like that, but very often I suspect a lot of that has to do more with people running from something, because I've been very guilty of that myself.
We just work, put in the hours, and keep working just to get away from other stuff.
Yeah, it's like I don't want to deal with stuff, so I'll just go to work and just bury myself in work. Yeah, that was the summer of 2020 for me.
I've had a few friends who've done that, where whether their relationship isn't going so well at home, so they'll spend more time at work, so they don't have to be home to deal with things. I had a guy that I used to know. He worked, like I said, 60 plus hours a week, and it had gotten to the point, because that's what he relied on his regular income, because
Mm-hmm.
apparently he had racked up a bunch of legal fees doing some nonsense stuff in his youth. So a lot of the stuff kind of like followed him into his adult life, and he was just continually paying it off. So he was doing it for a reason, and not that he recognized his mistakes. He continued doing nonsense things in his adult life, but he realized, like, all right, if I want to live comfortably, I have to work X amount of hours so I can pay off all my legal stuff and continue to pay my regular bills. And it just, I don't know, like, maybe you're right. Like, some of these people that just get accustomed to a certain way or run from things, and they just think that that's the way that they ought to be. And I've heard it said where you said $90,000 is the magic number. I've heard it said where if you go out to eat with friends or just with the family, you should have enough money to make you feel comfortable, quote unquote, to the point where you can look at the menu and not have to worry about what it's going to cost you to eat out that night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Simple
that
enough.
sounds reasonable. Yeah.
You don't have to worry about, oh, maybe I should get this, or maybe that's the special that's a little bit cheaper, whatever the case is. No. Order your appetizers, order your entrees, order your couple drinks, whatever the case is, and just to have a good time and not have to worry about, hey, am I going to be able to pay the electric bill when I get home?
Mm-hmm.
But again, we live in a world where the almighty dollar is so sought after and worshipped that you'll put in those long hours, you'll put in that overtime. And I had a situation recently where I think I mentioned during the summer, our place of work decided that they're going to give us what is referred to as summer hours. So we were working Monday through Thursday, off Friday, and we would still get paid for the 40 hours. It was fantastic. It's a great idea. I wish we would do it more often. But at one point, we were asked to come in on a Saturday because a job had come in and they wanted to have a quick turnaround. Myself and one of the other ladies said, yeah, we'll come in. We'll put the time in. No problem. I think we put in like an extra 6 hours on the weekend. Not a big deal. It was initially,
it's not bad.
Yeah, it was initially 4. They said, can you stay an extra 2 just to get the job done? We both agreed, yes, because we thought we were working overtime. When it came to pay that following week, they said, oh, because we're giving you off Friday, you're not technically working a full 40, so the 6 that you work on Saturday will be considered regular time. They told us that after the fact. And it's like, all right, that's kind of shitty. Like, we came in, you say come in on the weekend for some overtime. Overtime means time and a half.
Yeah, time over your regular hours. Yeah.
Correct. And that wasn't the case in this point. So I was like, all right. I looked at my coworker and I was like, all right, well, I guess now we know what we're going to say to them next time they're in dire need of somebody to come in, and it has to be on a Saturday. I'm like, no, thank you. But we're both in agreement. We both said it at the same time. Because that was just really, really shitty. And the same thing happened to me, I think it was like last week or the week before. I had clocked in a little extra overtime. Didn't mean to. There was no avoiding it when I punched out. That's what the time was. And I explained to them, hey, look, I know I stayed over a little bit. It wasn't intentional. But I said, if we're going to go by the logic of those Fridays are not being paid regular time, are considered regular time, not overtime. And then like the whatever I just clocked in for this week is regular pay. So just pay me with the regular pay on top of everything else. They checked with the front office. I just got my paycheck today. Double checked it just to make sure, and that extra time is included. It's regular time, not overtime. I was like, all right, I'll take the regular time in this case, because it was on my time at that point. It was like I stayed that extra few minutes to get the job done. It's not like I came in upending my schedule for other shit. So I was like, whatever. I'll just take it for the time being. Next time nonsense comes up, I'll just have a sterner stance on it. So we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just me. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. As far as this is concerned, again, there's another story that we can follow. I don't want to kill it ad nauseum. I think the actors in Hollywood and everything else, the writers, has been the biggest story when it comes to all the different strikes. Only because, let's face it, Hollywood is usually so revered. Like, oh my God, something's happening over there. So we'll come back to this as it develops.
Mm-hmm.
Any other stories? You were mentioning the Battle of, what was it again?
The Battle of Blair Mountain.
And what, pray tell, is this?
Okay, so take a step back with me back in time, about 102 years. Back in the 1920s, some of the biggest coal mining areas were in West Virginia. But oddly enough, West Virginia was one of the last states to actually get like a real big push to unionize with the United Mine Workers. Part of that was there were a lot of mine owners out in West Virginia who basically said, if you are a United Mine Worker member, if you're a card-carrying member, we fire you on the spot. This is not a union mine. It will never be a union mine. And one of the reasons for that is around this time period, during World War I, coal was considered a national necessity because of the war efforts in Europe for the whole thing. So around that point in time, the government basically stepped in and said, yeah, we need this coal done. We need this. This is vital to us winning this war. So, yeah, we're going to be, all of a sudden, coal miners got a lot more political power, so to speak. And by that, so did the union. So what happened was around this time, there were a lot more pushes for the unionization in the years after the war ended. So eventually, United Mine Workers started making a big push to unionize in West Virginia. And this got bad to the point where, I can't remember the name of the town. It may have been Madawan. It got to the point where there were actually some skirmishes between private detective agencies, which were effectively strikebreakers. They were usually ex-law enforcement or ex-military who basically got hired to go in there and break the unions. So what happened was, fast forward to one of the mines, basically, they voted to unionize, and I think something like, I want to say, close to 1,000 guys unionized, and only a handful didn't. So they all were fired on the spot. As was custom at the time, they were kicked out the same day of the company housing, because that was the rule. If you didn't, the moment you stopped working for the mine, the moment they came through, and they basically would go to that house and throw all your stuff out and say you're done. No time whatsoever to pack anything, just basically throw your shit out, because they were cold fucking people. So what happened was then the United Mine Workers would come in and basically set up 10 cities for all of the miners and their families to live in the short term until they got a handle on things. This one got a little bit extra bad because at the point in time, and I'm going to skip a lot of the details because I can be here babbling on and on and on like a maniac. And as you can hear, I'm in no condition to do that right now. But effectively what happened was as the strike spread, or as all those guys got fired, some of the local surrounding mines, they also said, well, we're going to go support the other miners. So they basically walked off as well. And I think at a certain point, it grew to about 3,000 miners who basically said, we're with the union. We're here to get everything together, or we're here to basically make sure that, we're getting fair treatment. I think one of the big things at that point in time is United Mine Workers had just negotiated, I want to say like a 25% raise for all of their workers, except for the non-union ones. So they all said, we want that raise too, because 25% is a big chunk of change. So it got down to the point where the strikebreakers came in, hired by the mine owners, and they came in heavy. To the point where they were even bringing in like military grade hardware. Like they were bringing in Thompson machine guns, all your standard rifles. They were even bringing in like water cooled like mounted machine guns and stuff like that. And it actually got to the point where you had, I want to say, the 3,000 miners on one side, and I think you had like something like 1,000 strikebreakers, assorted other people hired by the mines, and I think they even managed to convince the governor that they were right, so they actually had some of the National Guard guys on their side as well. And eventually it got to the point where it became a full-on war between these two sides. Like, they were shooting back and forth. It even got as crazy to the point where the mine owners actually hired airplanes, and at points in time, they hired them under the guise of, well, we're going to drop leaflets on their side, basically telling them that, that your side is, the United Mine Workers are bad, so you need to come back and just work regularly.
Oh, jeez.
And they actually used those airplanes to drop, like, I think dynamite and tear gas on the miners.
What the fuck?
Yeah, this is one of the craziest This is one of the craziest labor actions in the history of the United States, but they don't talk about this at all. Because the people who write the labor books or write the history books don't really like talking about the history of organized labor like this, because they want you to think that to win any type of concession, you need to get out your picket signs and go file for your permit to go march, and you have to do everything by the law. It's like, no. If you want any of these rights, you basically at a certain point in time, you have to start saying, well, we're basically going to have to give the ultimatum of give them to us or we're taking it by force. And this is how we got like the 40-hour work week and weekends off. This is one of the big things. Like, when it got to at the worst of this battle, and don't get me wrong, the miners lost this one. There were a couple attempts at there was they were like movements, like they were trying to like throw feints at different parts of the lines, and they were trying to like pincer movements. One of the other things that they don't like talking about either is a lot of socialist theory was also catching on in the United States at this point in time. So whole sections of the miner side, they were running around basically with like red flags tied to their like the barrels of their rifles and wearing like red bandanas over their faces. So yeah, anybody, if you want to go out, go look it up on YouTube. There's some books out about it. There's, start with the Wikipedia page and start digging into it more and more. But it's pretty crazy. Ultimately the mine owners won this battle, but when they started having congressional inquiries with everything that went on, because this was just got so out of hand that the feds got involved too, that the court of public opinion's lost, and eventually, further pushes were made for unionization that took over.
That's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, this is one of those events. I was actually meaning on covering this way back in Horrible Events in History. That was on my short list to do before we ended the show back in 2019. Back then, I just never got around to it. But yeah, this is one of those stories where because this is all the kind of stuff where it's like when you hear these stories, it's just like, what the. This is part of like what I call the secret history of the United States. Like stuff like this and the business plot when organized business owners decided FDR was a damn dirty socialist and they were trying to overthrow the federal government, using Smedley Butler, the former Marine Lieutenant General, as the figurehead of the whole thing, but he blew the whistle on it. Nobody talks about that in history books.
That's very true.
This is the shit. Yeah, this is the stuff that they just don't tell us about. And when I say they, I say the textbook manufacturers, because they're the ones who are very good at setting curriculum.
It's just crazy. I remember when you mentioned Smedley Butler back in the day for one of your horrible events, and that got me like curious as to what was going on, and I looked further into it. Yeah, you're right. Like there's certain things that are just not talked about, and it's because they want to present the sunnier side of history, because America is always the one who's in the right. We're always the ones who are striving for freedom and liberty and everything else. But when you look at the underbelly and you see some of these fucked up moments, it catches you by surprise because it's not, like you said, it's not taught normally, and whoever has to approve these books or the curriculums, they try to shy towards not including some of the seedier things. So
I always think of it this way. If somebody says America's the best country ever or America's the worst country ever, that is one of the most reductionist things I could ever think of hearing. Even as a country as young as ours, 200 and I'm trying to do the quick math in my head, 240 odd years old,
mm-hmm.
with about 350 million people in it right now, I think. We still have a lot of moving pieces and a lot of history. And I think it's fair to say, I mean, there are times when the United States have done some good things, and there's also been plenty of times where this country has done some shitty things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, good God, I mean, even if you ask anybody, it's like, oh, was there ever a forced youth and forced sterilization or eugenics programs? People would say, absolutely not. That's something that would happen in Nazi Germany. I was like, go look up some of the stuff that happened in the Carolinas back in, around the turn of the 19th century.
Yeah. There's been a bunch of nasty things, especially when it comes to medical and everything else like that. It just not the greatest example of United States, especially what was it, the book The Real Anthony Fauci. Again, not trying to get political, but there's mention of medical trials on orphans that they decided to use as test subjects to get away with like different whether it be vaccines or different medical treatments. They didn't have anybody to test it on, so they figured, oh, orphans. Who's going to miss an orphan? Wow, that's not exactly the way science should be running things, but again, the way that things were going at the time, they can get away with it. And I only mention that one because the book itself is really interesting. I haven't read all the way through it. I've only gotten a few blurbs here and there, but every time I keep hearing about it, they keep saying, oh yeah, all these things that he did or he was a part of. I was like, okay, they've got to be truthful to a certain extent because nobody has brought a litigation against it saying, oh no, he didn't do this, and how dare you accuse him of such things. Like there's some skeletons in the closet as far as the United States is concerned with a lot of this stuff. So the fact that, again, nobody talks about it, nobody really brings it up, and then when you do, it's kind of like swept under the rug. Yeah, there's a bunch of different things that we have to shine a light on and use as not just to help us remember what depths we've gone to, but also remind us that maybe we shouldn't keep going that same track. We can improve things down the line for everybody involved. So, yeah, that's fucking depressing.
Yeah, it is actually when you think about it.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit and try to bring this up in a certain extent. Okay, so I mentioned the writers and actors again. I've always bring it up because I'm always trying to keep an eye or an ear out for what's going on over there. One of the recent developments was that Drew Barrymore is resuming her talk show, and apparently has ticked off a lot of people when it comes to the strike, because it's going against guild standards or guild regulations at this point with the strike going on. I can see why she wants to get back on the air and why she wants to get back to doing the show. It does help people get back to work for a certain period of time. I don't know if everybody's going to want to go back to work. Like I said, writers and actors, they're definitely on strike, but because of all this, it affects everybody else. So cameramen, sound crews, makeup, hair, whatever the case is, all these other people are affected by this. So I can almost see Miss Barrymore's attempt at getting back to work, saying, hey, let's just get back to doing the thing that we love and doing the thing that we enjoy, and bring some levity to the situation, whereas everybody who's on strike, and especially the leaders of these guilds, saying, well, screw you. Like, what's the point of this if you're going to just go back to work? That's not setting a good example for everybody else as far as the strike is concerned. So I don't know how you feel about this one way or the other, or just indifferent.
Well, my first thought is, it's like, if you're doing that, then it kind of makes you a scab.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
other than that, I mean, it's Drew Barrymore. I didn't know she had a talk show. I don't really. I'm kind of out of touch with a lot of stuff these days.
No, that's fair. When I first heard about it, I can't remember who she had on. She had somebody on that she'd worked with in the past, and it was one of those like, oh, those awkward moments. You're not rekindling, but you're getting together with somebody that you had like turmoil turmoil with in the past, and now you're trying to like do an interview, whatever the case is. I don't know. Drew Barrymore is always an interesting individual in the world of Hollywood, considering her story. You know, a child actor who got involved in a lot of drugs and nefarious deeds behind the scenes in Hollywood, and then pretty much beat it all out, and thankfully, you know, came out on top and continued to have a career and continues to work in the realm of Hollywood. But for all that, this is not a good look for her, because like you said, no matter how you look at this, in this situation, she is a scab. She is going against the strike, so it's just like, you might want to reconsider what this is really, you know, doing for your career at this point. But we'll have to wait and see how that one turns out. Another story that I came across recently, and this one we're gonna have to wait and see again, because not many things are being promoted or talked about. But the new Crow movie has been making some headlines recently. Have you heard about this?
Yeah. Well, they've got the Skarsgård, I believe.
Yes, that's right. I'm going to read what I have here off of the Wikipedia entry that I found. And this first part of the entry is why I really didn't put too much into this at first, and we can talk about it a little bit further after that. On April 1st, 2022, a new attempt at a remake was announced by The Hollywood Reporter, with Bill Skarsgård set to star as Draven, Rupert Sanders directing, and Edward R. Pressman and Malcolm Gray co-producing. Days later, the site also reported that, and I don't know how to pronounce this person's name, it's FKA Twigs, so I don't know if it's formerly known as Twigs, apparently a British singer, writer, and dancer.
Okay.
So, this is just me being...
Twigs
ignorant.
it is.
Yes, Twigs. Twigs had been cast as Draven's fiancé. In July of 2022, production on the reboot was reportedly underway in Prague, Czech Republic. By August 26, 2022, Danny Houston was cast in an undisclosed role. I'm going to guess he's the villain, because he makes an awesome villain.
Wasn't he the... He was the lead vampire in 30 Days of Night, I think.
Oh, gosh, I haven't seen that one. Is he?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and wait a minute, you've never seen 30 Days of Night?
No, I started at one point, and then I think I passed out. It was a bad movie night.
Fair enough.
It was one of those
yes, he
I
was
was
the
meant
bad
to get
guy.
back to.
Yeah, he was in 30 Days of Night.
Okay, well, now I have to watch 30 Days of Night. I actually enjoy Danny Houston quite a bit, so any movie that he's in there. He's one of those guys, when you see him in the credits, like, okay, this might be good, and you just sit back and relax. Let's see. Okay, so that was Danny Houston in an undisclosed role. Again, I'm guessing a villain of some sort. Maybe, I don't know if he'd be a new Top Dollar. That'd be kind of weird.
He's a little... Yeah, I was going to say, he was born in 1962. So it would make him... God, he's pushing 60. That sounds a little bit too old to play Top Dollar, I think. Unless he's going to be Officer Albrecht.
Okay, I can see that one. Officer Albrecht, maybe like on the verge of retirement.
Yeah, depending on how they want to do it again. Yeah, I'm not sure how they're doing this one. Yeah, I'm purposely avoiding a lot of detail about this one because I wanted to speak for itself. Because, you know, much like you, well, you know, I was a very big fan of the original from 1994, and you know, I want to give this one a chance to breathe.
Yep.
So I've been kind of like giving it room.
Well, it says here, finally, for this entry, on September 16th of 2022, the film wrapped production. Now, I mentioned that because recently there's been a lot of talk and some posters, well, not posters, but like fan-made promotional materials starting to be made online. Because as it picks up more and more, people are talking about it more and more. They haven't set a date, again, with the strike going on. Who knows when and if that'll be a thing. And who's going to be distributing it at this point. Is Miramax still around or no? As far as movie studios?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think they are. I think they're just completely divorced from what's his face, the sexual predator,
Weinstein.
Weinstein. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have been to conventions where James O'Barr has spoken openly about this, where his creation, he's pretty much shut it down left and right when they've tried to come up with more remakes or more continuations of the story. For him, it's just like he doesn't care one way or the other. I mean, yeah, the initial movie was, you know, did well for him and did well for a lot of people involved, but ultimately we lost Brandon Lee during the production. So Obar has always had a certain feeling about the movie either being remade or a continuation of the story itself. This is interesting because, like you, I've been kind of like staying away from it, not really wanting to know too much about it, but this is the first time I've actually heard that it is actually Eric Draven's character once again being done. So this is a remake or a reboot, however you want to look at it, in an attempt to tell this first story again, which Obar did in the comics. And I don't know. This one's going to be an interesting one because for the longest time, anybody who confronted James Obar as far as the premise or how they're going to shoot it or anything else like that, he's essentially been like, okay. And he'll listen to them, but just as soon as he listens to them, he pretty much says, all right, there's the door. Like, there was nothing he was really ever dedicated to. He was just, okay, I have to take this meeting because somebody wants to tell me something. That's about it. The fact that we've gotten this far is kind of cool.
I remember him saying that he had a very specific vision in his head of what he wanted it to be, and it sounded very much like an art film meets like Taxi Driver. Like it was going to be very gritty, it was going to be very dark, it was going to be very uncomfortable, and I was on board with it. I think that was the iteration that was supposed to have. Oh bloody hell! What the hell's the British guy's name? Luke Owen.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm going back about 8-9 years here, because I think he was telling us this when we saw him speak in 2014 or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, back in those days, it was a whole different. That was that time period when that's what he was talking about. And then after that, I remember for a while there was even word of Jason Momoa was involved, but yeah, that one seems like that one went away as quickly as it showed up in terms of how rumors go.
My favorite thing is whenever they say that another actor is going to play the character of the Crow or even the character of Eric Draven, they always do a mock-up of what they would look like in the makeup. So there was one of Luke Owen. Luke Owen, for anybody who doesn't know, Dracula Untold, the Hobbit trilogy. He was one of the villains in Furious. Yeah, thank you. He was one of the Shaw brothers. I believe he was the first Shaw brother, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was the younger brother, and then what's his face came in as the older brother.
Statham, yes.
Jason Statham. Thank you.
They did a mock-up with him as far as the makeup is concerned, and truth be told, it looked pretty good. Like it looked like he could pull it off. Jason Momoa, same thing, because let's face it, he was like the it guy for a while, and everybody just wanted to cast him in just about everything. Hell, I didn't think he was going to make a good Aquaman, but that first movie actually is pretty darn good.
Yeah. Wow.
Even what's his name, Bradley Cooper, apparently even tested for the makeup and everything else. Like actually went in for a makeup test, and same thing. Everybody's like, all right, let's see, he can probably do this. And Bradley Cooper, I would take him in just about any movie at this point. But seeing his range and see what he can do, like if you go back to some of his character work, like not a good example, but if you watch the A-Team. Like, you have a bunch of different people in that movie that you don't really think it's going to be a good movie. And don't get me wrong, it's the A-Team. Like, you've got, the material itself is kind of self-involved. It's not good, it's not bad. It depends on if you're a fan of the show and if you're a fan of the subject material. But Bradley Cooper's character as Face worked really well. I was surprised.
Yeah.
A Star is Born. His work as Rocket Raccoon. Racket. It's a different kind of raccoon. For Guardians. All the stuff that he's been in, he's always done a great job. So it's great to see him pulling it off. Him as Eric Draven, I don't see it up front, but I don't doubt he would have found the character and been able to work with it.
Yeah.
So to see that it's going again, Edward Pressman has been involved in the Crow movies since the inception. So, I mean, you've got the general bones of this still working. The Crow franchise, unfortunately, has just been hit with a lot of duds after, I'd say, the first two. So,
and even the second one is debatable.
See, I have not seen the second one in a long, long time. And it's, to me, I remember it more like a fever dream at this point. The way the villain worked, the way they tried portraying his powers and everything else. I don't remember the name. Was it Vincent Perez?
Yeah, Vincent Perez, a French actor. This was supposed to be the movie that broke him in the U.S., but he was like after that one came out, he was like, "Yeah, I'm going back to France. Thanks, y'all."
Um, it's an okay movie, and I'm sure if I watched it nowadays, I'd probably hit a little bit differently for me now that I have my own family, being that the first movie is between husband and wife, lovers. Second movie is a father-son story. So,
Hmm.
they're trying to find a way to make it work as far as the love of whether it be family or a loved one, whatever the case is. First one is amazing. Don't get me wrong. Brandon Lee, Michael Wincott, all the different actors. That one just became a cult classic. Whether it's because of Brandon Lee's passing or other, that movie itself, just the film, the actors, the soundtrack, like everything just came together in this lightning in a bottle moment.
Hmm.
Since then, the follow-up films haven't hit as well. Like we mentioned, the second one, City of Angels, has its moments. Supposed to be a continuation
Also a
of sorts.
bonkers cast.
Yes, with Iggy Pop, who was supposed to be the inspiration for Fun Boy in the first one. What was her name? Thuy Trang, who was the former Yellow Ranger,
Yep.
being a bad guy. Who was Nemo?
Thomas Jane.
Thank you. I'm blanking on his name.
No, because I remember rewatching this probably about 10 years ago or so. And I'm sitting there looking, I was like, holy shit, that's the Punisher.
Yeah. It's an interesting movie going back to watch, but unfortunately, like, there's certain points it's just like, what the fuck am I watching?
Well, it's even wackier because the guy who was the big evil, the new version of Top Dollar, Judah, the black guy, he was one of the lawyers on one of the iterations of Law and Order for years. So I was just looking, I was like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing here?
He's just going for it.
Ian Jury was the one tattoo artist who was friends with growing up Sarah. So it's just fucking weird, Ian Jury of Ian Jury and the Blockheads, the British punk / new wave band from the 70s / 80s. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. What was the one after City of Angels? That was Salvation?
Yeah, that was Salvation. That one was, that one I watched once and I said, that wasn't bad. Let's not look at this any more closely.
I think they did a smart thing going back to, the relationship of boyfriend, girlfriend, or, husband and wife. It seemed like a regular story trope to be able to go through rather than all the other attempts that they tried. So Kirsten Dunst and what was the guy? Eric Mabius was his name?
Yeah, Eric Mabius. Yeah.
And again, it was fun. They got a little creative with some of the stuff that they did as far as the bad guys. I remember Kirsten Dunst at one point getting her mouth sewn shut, and she's literally cutting the strands of, I don't know, was it twine or something that they used to sew her mouth shut? I'm like, oh,
I think so.
Kind of gruesome. But it was the idea, like, something had happened and he had been, killed for a reason, and then it slowly unfolds as to how he was killed and who was behind it and everything else, and he came back, obviously, to set the wrong things right. And then I've never seen the follow-up to Salvation.
Wicked Prayer?
Yes, the one with, was it David Boreanaz, Eddie Furlong, who else was in this?
And that blonde woman, she was in Josie and the Pussycats. Tara Reid.
Oh, you're right. She was in that one. See, I've stayed away from Wicked Prayer.
I have not watched that one either. I remember I knew some people who watched it, and I was like, is this worth watching? And they both, actually it was Jimmy and Holly, both simultaneously looked at me and said, do not watch it. Just let this one go.
Just
let it go. Yeah. Well, and the funny thing is, what I've always wanted to see, because the best life that I've seen come out of this stuff was in some of the comics that were after the fact of the original, and some of the books that came out of it, because those were way more captivating to me.
What was? I know you and I both read the book, The Lazarus Heart.
Yes, Crow Lazarus Heart by Poppy Z. Bright.
Yes, that one was really cool, especially the way they describe where the one character gets pretty much eviscerated, and then you see all the organs and bodily fluids start to return to the body, and as it heals itself. I was like, oh, that's a fucking cinematic moment if I ever read one.
Well, that was a very good one because the way Poppy Z Bright wrote it was written very much as it was way more of a horror story than anything else, I think.
Yes.
In addition to that, the other thing I really, really liked about it too was the backdrop of the entire thing. It was weirdly prophetic because that book was written in like 99, 2000, and it was set in New Orleans as a monstrous hurricane was chugging its way through the Gulf, aimed right at the city.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember thinking about that back in 2005 when we all saw Katrina just slam the hell out of New Orleans. But yeah, between that one was good. I remember there was a comic shot that came out in I think the late 1990s called Crow, Wild Justice, which was it was the standard story. These two street thugs, they go to carjack this one married couple. They end up killing them. Some years later, the guy comes back from the dead to get revenge. The one guy he kills, who's still an unrepentant criminal, and the other guy he goes after, who is the other accomplice in the carjacking and murders, he goes to prison and he really does repent, to the point where it starts raising the question where, like, at the end of the story, there's a great scene where the guy who comes back for vengeance finally catches up with the guy, and the guy basically surrenders to him. He was like, I can never, no matter what I do, I can never, pay you back for what I took from you. So if it would help you at all to take my life, go ahead and do it.
No shit.
Yeah, and it's really cool because it actually starts getting into a lot of like these weird philosophical questions of like, what is the nature of justice versus revenge and stuff like that. I remember reading it over and over again because it took me a while to kind of make sense of it, the entire thing. But it was very interesting, and I'm not going to give away like the ending, but the ending of it.
Okay. Were there other novelizations that came out? I can't really think past those.
There were a couple other ones. I'm blanking on them right now because I am loaded up on cough medicine. But I know they've been, it hasn't been as fertile a ground, but there's been a bunch of like comics and stuff like that and books. But yeah, I'm just, the only other one I can think of right now is there was a crossover with a character called Razor, who was just like this like hyper violent character who was just out for revenge, and she ends up like basically involved with the Crow as well.
Okay, here I'm looking at some of the different ones here. So there was the regular Crow story. There was the Crow Dead Time. Let's see what else. The Crow Flesh and Blood. Crow City of Angels we talked about. Wild Justice you had mentioned. The Crow Waking Nightmares, which was 4 issues from Kitchen Sink in the late 90s. Let's see. The Crow number 0, A Cycle of Shattered Lives, one shot. Sounds like it might be like a compilation. Here's one. The Crow / Razor, Kill the Pain, 7 issues.
Yes.
McFarlane did a redo of the original story for Image Comics back in the day. I remember that one. I picked those up not necessarily for the story, just for the artwork and for the covers because they were pretty attractive at the time. And there's a bunch of other ones: the Crow Death and Rebirth, Crow Skinning the Wolves, the Crow Curari. Apparently, what the fuck? The X-Files / the Crow conspiracy.
That's weird.
That one came out as a one-shot in 2014, IDW. The Crow Pestilence, The Crow Memento Mori. Those two were also by IDW stories. The Crow Hack Slash, The Crow Hark the Herald, and The Crow Lethe, Lethe. 3 issues. IDW again. There was also another mention of a story, because I remember back in the day going to conventions, and you could find it sometimes on certain people's tables, depending on who you were, whose table you were perusing. Let me just bring it back up real quick. In the late 90s, a sequel / reboot to The Crow entitled The Crow 2037 was in the works. It would be set in the future. It was written and scheduled to be directed by Rob Zombie, but ultimately was canceled. You can still find the script for this out in the wild. You can probably find the script online nowadays. But I remember this one being talked about a lot because, again, when you were talking about the what was it, House of a Thousand Corpses and everything else, they were like, "Oh, what's the next thing Rob Zombie's going to work on?" And everybody was assuming that The Crow was going to be one, and it was rumored for the longest time. And I remember hearing and even seeing the script at conventions. And you would see the title, The Crow 2037, but nobody really ever found out what it was, and there wasn't much more information at the time. But I'm going to have to look this one up now and see if I can hunt a copy down. Because, truth be told, you mentioned before, we're both big fans of The Crow itself and the story by James O'Barr. If you ever get a chance, for anybody listening, if you hunt down the Miramax DVD released back in the day, there is a special or a bonus on the DVD where you have an interview with James O'Barr. And he pretty much describes how he came up with the idea of the character and the story and his idea of loving something and losing it, and how painful and hurtful that can be. And really, it's just a heartbreak of a story. But the story of how the book came to be, James O'Barr apparently worked on it for something like 9 years. He just, like, here and there did a few things. His artwork is amazing. The way he worked with anatomy, I mean, I believe, didn't he work on medical journals or pamphlets for, like, the military or something like that?
He was working on, I think there was some medical stuff he was working on, but also he was illustrating hand-to-hand combat manuals for the Marine Corps back in the 1970s.
Okay. There's this one part in the graphic novel that I always remember where the character of Eric Draven's hanging out in his abandoned loft or studio apartment, and he's, like, dancing around and just, like, posing in almost like these dance poses. And when you see the anatomy and how O'Barr draws it, it's so well done. It always captured my imagination. I could almost, like, see him dance off the page as that character in the books. So as O'Barr's working on this, and he's never really intended to release it, but apparently one of his friends got a hold of the book and sent it out to a publisher. Only to find out that the publisher accepted it, and suddenly O'Barr gets a letter in the mail saying, "Congratulations, we're gonna publish your story." Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
It was never intended to be put out there, but Caliber Comics back in the day put the book out, and slowly but surely it gained steam, and other people talked about it, and other people were interested in it, and it ultimately led to that first movie, and everyone was like, "The Crow, what the fuck is this?" And it gained its own notoriety, but then the death of Brandon Lee pushed it even further, and at that point it gained more infamy at that point, because it was the last film for Brandon Lee, who was just starting to really make a name for himself outside of the shadow of his father Bruce Lee. So he was finally going to be able to stand on his own, and everybody was thinking about, oh, this would be great, what's going to happen. There's a lot of different stories that came out from the production of that movie. It's just crazy how it all came together and eventually got released, and it's been so long at this point that the movie's been out. But to hear,
are you ready to feel some pain?
Oh, no, don't do it to me. Go for it.
Okay. Next May.
Oh God, I know
is going to be the 30th anniversary of The Crow.
Fuck you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when I did the math on that one earlier this year. That one, I was like, excuse me, I'm going to lay down on the ground and die now.
Yeah, don't forget to stretch before you do that.
Yeah, really, I'll blow a quad out.
Yeah, no, it's crazy that it has been that long. It does not feel that way whatsoever, but what that movie has meant to so many different people, how much stuff has come out as far as like merchandise and figures and statues and all those other things, it's endured the test of time. And that first movie still, holds up. But like we said, the subsequent follow-ups just never really quite hit it. And there was even the TV show that they tried making. They essentially took the first movie, cut it up into multiple episodes, and set it in daytime as opposed to nighttime, which I always thought was kind of weird.
I tried to like that so much because I like Mark Dacascos.
Yes,
I think he's a pretty good actor, and he's a hell of a martial artist. But that show was just wrong place, wrong time.
It was a weird one. Didn't it debut on Sci-Fi?
I can't remember.
Or was it somewhere
I
else?
mean, yeah, I don't know. It was definitely like floating around like basic cable for its, I think, like season or season and a half run.
Because they did the first story, the storyline itself from the movie, Top Dollar and his goons and everything else. But then they tried going a step further storyline wise. Because at one point, like, he's having the character of Eric Draven is like having a premonition or a dream, and then like they started involving like Native American story or folklore with it. And yeah, you're right. It just good attempt. Just production was not where it needed to be. Exposure for the ratings was not where it needed to be, and God bless Mark Dacascos. He's always been in a bunch of different projects, and just some stuff are cult classics, and other ones just duds. Although, if you're
Yeah,
watching, if you're a fan of Food Network, he became the chairman on Iron Chef for the longest time.
yeah, I heard about that. That's pretty cool.
Just an excuse for him to be up at the podium and eating food every now and then. What was another movie he was in? I remember, what was it? I believe it was
What's that?
Only the Strong.
Oh yeah, was that the movie about capoeira?
Yes,
Yeah.
and I remember watching that back in the day. Thought it was really good. You know, the first time you see a dancing fighting style as far as capoeira is concerned, that was always exciting. But like, just maybe it's like the curse of a curse of martial artists. Well, they'll be in different movies and they'll have like a certain level of success, but they never really break big. The other one,
Yeah, it seems like it just doesn't happen. Yeah, go ahead.
the other one that he was in, and this one is always a sore spot for me. Did you ever watch the Double Dragon movie based off the video game?
Unfortunately.
So Billy Lee and Jimmy Lee, and he was the one brother. He gets possessed by the bad guy using whatever medallion, and he suddenly becomes like the villain of the movie for like, I don't know, like a 10 minute scene. And here's Mark
Hmm.
Dacascos beating the crap out of the white guy. But like a wrestling match, he has to put the white guy over because he's the main star of the film. Like, oh, come on, man. Mark Dacascos
Yeah.
deserves so much better than this. But he got to display his
Oh,
talents and his abilities. It just didn't work out for him in the long run as far as that's concerned. So it was always
one of
frustrating.
the one of the best ones he was in my opinion, is it's a movie called Brotherhood of the Wolf,
Yes. I do recall that one. We
yes,
saw it in the theaters when it came out.
which is yeah, that is one of the best movies that no one has ever heard of. It seems like because it had such an odd history, and it was also a foreign film.
Was it?
Yeah, it was French.
You're right. Yes. Okay. See, here's the funny thing. Our one friend who decided to invite us out to movies one night, he goes, "Oh, we're gonna go watch this Brotherhood of the Wolf." And when we went out to watch it, we didn't know much about it at first. And all my one friend said, "Oh, it's got Mark Dacascos in it." I'm like, "Sold."
Yeah.
Tell me no more. Let's go. And yeah, that was a fun film. I remember that one. Oh my god, how old is that one?
That one came out in, oh, good God. It came out in, well, I know it got American distribution around like 2002-ish because it was very odd. I remember our old buddy Kurt, he hit me up one day back in 2002 when I was in college, and he says, "Hey, do you want to go see this wild ass like action horror mystery movie called Brotherhood of the Wolf?" And I was like, "Sure, I got nothing going on." So we went to the local cinema to go watch it. And I remember like we were like it was me, him, and like two other people that we all just randomly went, and we were having a great time. Like there was maybe a handful of people in the theater, like there was no one there. So we're like yelling and carrying on and cheering because we're having so much fun with it. And then after that, I remember telling everybody, it's like, you got to go check this out. It's playing at the Cinemark near us. Go check it out. And then I found out a few days later, the one copy of the print they had, somebody like fucking like misthreaded it and fucked up the entire print. So they couldn't play
No.
it.
Oh, that
Yeah,
sucks.
yeah, because this was back in the era when they actually got like the giant spools in at the fucking movies
Yeah.
before everything was digital. But yeah, that's one of those movies where it's actually gotten like a bit of a resurgence um, between like them putting out like special edition DVDs and stuff like that, and people coming back and realizing. And also one of the main characters in it, whose name is escaping me right now. He was in he's a pretty well known actor, and he's always really good at playing like scumbags. I can't remember the dude's name, but he was in he was in Eastern Promises with what's his nuts from Lord of the Rings.
Viggo Mortensen.
Viggo Mortensen, thank you very much. Yeah, oh, hold on a second. Yeah, he was also in that movie Underwater with the lady from Jennifer Lawrence. Yeah, he's like one of those actors who's like, when you look for him, you see him and you realize it's like, oh, this guy's actually like really good. And his name is Vincent, Vincent Cassel.
I remember him, and I didn't know who he was when I watched Brotherhood of the Wolf, and I'm looking it up right here. It says 2001 was the release.
That would make sense for you. That would make sense for. It probably came out in France that year.
Vincent Cassel was also the Night Fox in Ocean's 12 and Ocean's 13.
Oh, okay.
If anybody's never watched Ocean's 12, at the very end he plays like a master thief who at one point has to break through this one museum's security, has like a laser grid system, and he does this weird dance scene where he beats the laser system to get to his ultimate goal. Pretty badass when you look at it, but it's kind of like almost like an amusement moment, really.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. I had the synopsis. I'm going to read the shortened version. The 18th century France, the Chevalier de Fronsac and his Native American friend Mani are sent to the Gouverdan, I believe it says Gouverdan province, at the king's behest to investigate.
I always say Javaudan, but I believe that's I think I'm over pronouncing it, but just call it Javaudan region. It's in the southern central region of France.
Gouverdan province, excuse me, at the king's behest to investigate the killings of hundreds of by mysterious beast. So, fun movie
based on real events.
So this is 18th century. I'm trying to think. Was that during? I remember there was a war. I don't remember if it was 18th century, but there was a war where the two fighting sides at one point had to lay down their arms and come to a compromise and say, hey, look, we're trying to fight one another, that's fine, but there are wolves in the fucking forest, and they're killing more of us than we are of one another. So how about we call a truce and hunt down the wolves first, take care of them, and then we can resume fighting?
I don't know about that, but I do know the story was set around... I think it was in the years after the Great Enlightenment, but it was before the French Revolution. I'm sorry, I'm not up on my French history.
I'll have to look that one up. We'll report back on that one. All of this is to say that there's a new Crow movie that's wrapped filming. Post-production is probably long in its process at this point. Sorry, words are escaping me tonight, apparently. We'll find out, hopefully, if not this year, maybe sometime next year, we might get some kind of a release date. And
hopefully
we'll see what happens. Because I would imagine they would be announcing something around this time. Again, Hollywood season's coming into play, fall season, whatever the case is. And it would fall along those lines because, the first movie always had the backdrop of Devil's Night. So right around Halloween was when it was framed in the first movie. But I don't know, again, if they're going to keep to the comic or if they're going to keep to the movie. Is he going to be a construction worker? Is he going to be a rock musician, an up-and-coming band? Whatever the case is for the character of Eric Draven. So we'll see and report back on this one as it becomes more and more available. And hopefully, I don't want to say hopefully it lives up to the original. I hope it sets its own mark. It would be nice to be able to distinguish the Brandon Lee version and the Skarsgård version and see how it plays out. So
yeah, let him do his own thing. Let him put his own voice into it.
Exactly. It already has a lot of baggage coming with it. Let's not put further baggage on its shoulders to make it harder for it to make its own mark in the industry at this point. But we'll have to report back as more develops on that one. And I might have to watch Wicked Prayer.
Oof, you're a braver man than I.
You know what? I just want to be I can't. Let's put it this way: the Twilight movies. When those movies came out, everybody was making jokes about vampires that sparkle and teen angst and all this other stuff. And, you know, the character Robert Pattinson played was so old compared to Kristen Stewart's character. I was like, I would love to join everybody on making these jokes and harping on the movie. I've never seen them. So if I haven't seen them yet, I'm not going to make fun of it or, you know, go for it as far as one way or the other. If I see a movie, then I have grounds to say, oh yeah, that was a complete piece of shit. See the Fantastic Four reboot that Fox Studios put out a few years back.
Was that the one with Michael B. Jordan?
Yes, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah.
Michael B. Jordan as the Human Torch. There was a lot of cool parts that could have come together for that film, but it was just Fox trying to exercise its movie rights so they didn't lose the rights to the movie and for them to revert back to Marvel and Disney. That was a whole different story. So, but I do believe we've hit our mark for tonight. How are you feeling over there? I know your coughs are still killing you.
I feel like shit.
If it makes you feel any better, I'll cut most of them out. You'll be fine. You'll sound healthy and fit on this episode. Don't worry about it.
Sorry to make extra work for you, pal.
No. Don't worry about it. It comes with the territory. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. My name is Eric Hernandez.
I'm Doug.
And we are the Rabblecast.